Well, before we continue, let me just share a few thoughts about this year's Diocesan Stewardship Appeal. By now you've received a letter in the mail from me and probably your pledge envelope from the diocese as well. If you didn't receive an envelope in the mail, that means you're probably not actually registered in the parish. You can contact the parish office about that. But there's also some extra pledge envelopes available on a table in the narthex. You'll also find a basket there for you to drop your donation, your pledge card. So thank you to everyone who's already done that, even in the last week or so. But I hope over the last week you've had a chance to prayerfully consider your own participation in the appeal, to kind of look at your own financial situation and pray about what the Lord is asking you to do in terms of contributing. Last year, you'll remember, we made our parish goal in only 10 weeks, which is just remarkable. There were 152 families or 152 households that participated. That's 24.5% of the parish. Of course, we'd love to see that a little higher this year. Let's try and get up to 30% of our households participating this year. But those 152 families last year helped us to reach 108.7% of our goal. And of course, anything we raise above our goal stays right here at St. Gall to help us with our regular expenses and ministries. If we come in underneath our goal, though, we have to make up the difference from our regular Sunday collections. Our goal this year is $44,921. Not 920, but $921, right? $44,921. Of course, as you know, this appeal is the primary source of income for all the different ministries that our diocese offers us. So, for instance, the training of our new deacons, that is the programs that Deacon Greg went through as he was becoming a deacon. The education of our seminarians for the diocese. I know that personally, if I had to pay for my own seminary education, I probably wouldn't be a priest today. It's just far, far too expensive. All the outreach done by Catholic charities around our diocese comes from this as well. We also have a fantastic refugee resettlement program in our diocese that goes all the way back to the 70s. And they're working right now with a few families from the Ukraine. And of course, the Life Office, which covers things like the preparation of engaged couples for marriage and everything that we do in terms of Respect Life ministry throughout the course of the year, too. The traditional or the biblical standard for stewardship, for tithing, is to try and give 10% of our income. As Catholics, we have traditionally divided it by saying, well, I'm going to give 5% to my parish, 4% to charities of my own choosing, and then 1% to the diocesan church, which we would do through this appeal each year. Of course, some people will be able to do more than that 1%. Some folks will have to do less, and that's fine. The way we make our goal is not by just having a few people give really huge pledges, but by everyone doing the best they can. And even if you can only give $20 or $30, well, all of those pledges add up. Every pledge matters. They all help us to reach our goal. So thank you for those who helped last year. Thank you again to those who have already made a pledge this year. Thank you for keeping this in prayer, taking this to prayer, and trying to figure out what your participation level will be this year. And I'll make sure to keep you posted in the next few weeks as we move forward towards reaching our goal. I'll give you an update each and every week. So please keep the success of the appeal in your prayers, and thank you for anything at all that you might be able to give this year. I once read about a priest in Ireland who was getting ready to say a funeral mass for a family that was deeply divided. On one side of the church were those who sided with the IRA and the movement toward Irish freedom. And on the other side of the church, the other side of the center aisle, were family members who sympathized with the British government and wanted to remain a part of Great Britain. But their differences within the family had led to some bitter divisions for decades. And the priest said that he realized that there was no way that he could celebrate that funeral mass and just ignore the terrible hostility that existed between those two sides of the family. So he did something very interesting. He told everyone in the church that he would not even start that funeral mass until they all first exchanged the sign of peace across the center aisle. Because he knew that there had to be some attempt at reconciliation, however small, or the words of the Mass would just ring hollow. They would be meaningless. In other words, everyone at that funeral Mass would be saying words of belief, but there wouldn't be any actions putting those beliefs into practice. So how could those people pray for the resurrection and the salvation of their cousin if there wasn't at least some glimmer of the transforming power of the resurrection in their own hearts and their own lives as well? And that leads us to this morning's gospel. Jesus has risen from the dead at this point. But now we find that Peter and the other disciples are back home with their fishing nets in Galilee. Now, why in the world did they go back to their old jobs after they had seen the risen Lord? Didn't their belief in the resurrection make any difference in their lives whatsoever? Well, that's precisely the point of today's gospel. Just saying that we believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ isn't enough unless those words of belief are translated into actions that change our lives. So yes, the resurrection means that Jesus himself, in bodily form in the flesh, rose from the dead and appeared to his disciples. That's what happened to him. But even more important is what the resurrection does for us. What does it do for us? Well, let's go back to the gospel. Let's go back to the gospel. As we heard one morning as the sun is just rising, Jesus appears to the apostles after they spent a fruitless night fishing. And the resurrected Jesus begins the work of transforming their lives, especially Peter. Jesus invites them to share a meal that he's just prepared over a charcoal fire. Now remember that the last time that Peter had sat around a charcoal fire was the night that Jesus was arrested, when 3 times Peter denied even knowing Jesus. Now, though, Peter is given the chance to reaffirm his faith in the Lord, as Jesus asks him 3 times, "Peter, do you love me?" In the process of answering those questions, Peter experiences Jesus' forgiveness. And he shows us too, Peter does, how the resurrection has the power to heal even painful memories that we've tried to bury deep inside of ourselves and ignore and forget about. But this exchange between Peter and Jesus shows us how the resurrection isn't only about forgiveness. It's not only about healing. The resurrection is also, for every one of us, a call to action. A call to action. Peter, this simple fisherman, is given the new task of caring for Christ's church as the first pope, imitating Jesus, the Good Shepherd himself. And in that role, as Jesus says, Peter will once again have the opportunity to reaffirm and prove his love for Jesus by laying down his life, as he once promised Jesus that he would do. As Catholics, we celebrate Easter for 50 days, a long time, 50 days. And we do that because the resurrection is at the very heart of our faith. But again, the question posed by today's gospel is this: how does the resurrection work in me? Not just at the end of my earthly life, but right now. How does the resurrection work in me? And it's not just a question about believing in the resurrection, but about being transformed, about being changed. So yes, the resurrection gives us the power that heals our memories and forgives our sins and frees us from shame and regrets. But it also calls us to live out its effects in our lives. That is, through our choices, through our actions, and through our daily treatment of the people around us. The resurrection gives us the grace, like Peter, to lovingly, but also clearly and proudly, profess our faith and profess it to a society that is increasingly hostile to the faith. And the resurrection calls us to care for one another as members of Jesus' flock, watched over by Francis, Peter's successor and our shepherd. So whether we realize it or not, we are Catholic Christians and disciples of Christ precisely because of the resurrection. But unless we're open to the power of the resurrected Jesus and show by our actions that our lives and hearts can be transformed and changed, well, then the words of belief and the words of prayer that we say here will have very little meaning indeed.